Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And if you are watching on Facebook Live, thank you for tuning in. We're so excited for tonight's event. I'm Cheryl Brody Franklin. I'm the director of Newhouse in New York City. Semester, it's not new anymore, a semester in New York for Newhouse juniors and seniors. They intern during the day in their field of study and then take courses at night.
That's a good story about the courses at night. Yuck, yuck.
They really do. Raise your hand if you're a Newhouse NYC student. Yay. If you would like to be involved in Newhouse NYC as a mentor, as a speaker, or as just coming to these types of events, please email me. I'd love to have you. We are so thrilled to have Ed and his guests every semester. His panels always sell out, like they did tonight. And there's always a fantastic conversation that happens at each one. And I'm always excited to hear who Ed wants to invite. And this semester, people were extremely excited to have the former NBA commissioner as our speaker. Since tonight's talk sold out so quickly, we decided to do a Facebook Live so people can watch this live right now from anywhere or watch it later. And it can be played back at any time. So what I'd love for you all to do, everyone in the room right now, take out your phones. Really, seriously, take out your phones. And share the live stream on your phone because you want as many people to watch. And so you can just go to Newhouse NYC and share the feed that way. And also the first part of the talk will be a conversation with Ed and David. And then afterward, we'll have a Q&A session. If you'd like to ask a question, please ask it in the comments on the Facebook Live feed. And they will text me. I have a wonderful command center in the back who will send me the questions. So please, please, please send in questions. We would love to have them at the end. And then you can tweet your questions as well with David Stern Live, and we'll look there as well. So thank you so much for your support of Newhouse NYC, and I'll turn it over to Ed and David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for the elegant arrangements. I found out yesterday that Facebook Live would be here. After preparing to talk to David about what I've done successively these previous semesters, which is the future of media and communications and the incredible determinate role that live sports has. And the question is, whither go sports? They dominate right now, but the cloud that's hanging over the cable and programming and satellite industry is perhaps hanging over sports as well. Now that I know it's being taken back to the campus, I'm going to modify some of my questioning because besides the excellence of the Newhouse School at Syracuse, there is a Falk School of Sports Management at Syracuse, and we want to make this available and valuable to them. And I think Syracuse has been known to participate in basketball until they were rather harshly treated a few years ago, either by their own hand or by their governing body. The tribulations of being in charge. And when I referred to the NCAA as the governing body of basketball affecting the Orange Men, it recalls my experience when I was at ABC 100 years ago, and we got the exclusive rights to college football for the network. And what did that consist of? One game a week on Saturday afternoon. Not from each school, not from each conference, one single football game. I think there are few more than one right now. And what happened that same year? We joined forces with a group starting a new football league called the American Football League with Lamar Hunt and Joe Wilson and Joe Foss. What was Foss's first name?
Joe Foss.
And
He's the commissioner.
you know what we paid for rights for 15 American Football League games the first year? $1,500,000. Let me read you two paragraphs from last week's Wall Street Journal. Alibaba Group Holdings co-founder Joseph Tsai is buying a 49% stake in the Brooklyn Nets for a valuation of $2.3 billion. Less than half, no majority control. Two paragraphs down, it says, The NBA has a young, diverse fan base, international allure, and a generation of culturally relevant and highly marketable stars. It struck a $24 billion TV deal in 2014 that secured its media rights for the next decade. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend who in my long experience has done a job second to none, and I've known a lot of people who do their respective jobs, and I'm spoiling it for you because it's your bar mitzvah speech.
At least he's able to read my handwriting.
I can't read mine, why not read yours? David Stern has done a remarkable job with what was a nice sport, but he made it a great sport and a great television attraction. And the uniqueness of it is obvious and demonstrable. David, let me start with some basics about basketball.
Okay.
What does the journeyman minimum salary player get by guarantee?
I don't even know. It's so much. I mean, last time I looked, it was 400,000. It's probably doubled by now. I stepped down on Feb 1, 2014, and I didn't ask them to send me a copy of the new collective bargaining agreement, or the Constitution and bylaws either. But it's a lot of money, and if you're a journeyman, because we put in a clause years ago that says that anything above the minimum, the league picks up, so as not to discourage players who have 10 years of service who would be entitled to more on a scale from being signed. So the team plays up to what the minimum was required, and the pool picks up the rest, so that we're taking care of veterans.
That I didn't know, and that's exactly leading into my next question. What does a superstar get? What does a LeBron make all in?
Oh, God. These are hard questions. What's the max? I guess it's, 20 some odd million dollars a year times 5. And the teams that pay it are probably disappointed because it was our idea at the league level to make the contract shorter so that teams didn't get stuck with contracts that had, outlived their usefulness, like a 7-year deal. So there's a limit of 5-year contracts. 4 if you re-sign, if you sign with another team, 5 if your team keeps you. So I don't know. What was all about? Harden just signed a $220 million contract for 5 years. That's a lot of money. It must have been $40 million a year. I'm wrong again. But it's a lot. And it's the highest in professional sports.
And what are the sources of income for a team?
Our sources of income for the team are at the national level. It's a share of network television revenues, a share of licensing revenues, a share of whatever global sponsorship revenues you can get, a share of international television revenue, and at the team level, it's a share of your gate receipt, local media, sponsorship. And of course, many of our teams have been quite imaginative in developing hotels on the property or other real estate investments around the arena as well.
Let's parse that a little bit. Gate receipt is obvious.
Right.
The concession of the arena is obvious.
Right.
Sometimes they own the arena, sometimes they don't.
But it's a function of the lease produces the results, so whether they own it or they don't own it, they get a share of the concessions, a share of, they get the gate, they get concessions and novelties, and probably a cut of parking as well, if they don't get all of it, because they own the parking area. It's a good business.
It's a good business. That's exactly my point. When he talks about the television revenue, a lot of teams in all sports have opted to take less as a rights fee, but to own the network on which it's broadcast.
Yes. Yes.
The Yankees started because they saw that the Knicks and Rangers owned MSG Network, and that was just which pocket you put the money in. And some leagues share a lot of revenue, like football, NFL, and some leagues are constructed so that there's a national pot, playoff games, championships, that gets divided, as David explained. And then there's a local pot where they own the residual rights to the games that the league hasn't taken away from them
Right.
for the national package.
Not taken away, that the league hasn't selected to show to a national audience.
Excuse me.
You'd be surprised how some teams, they get upset sometimes about the money, but try putting a team through a season without any national exposure, and the owner will be in your ear full time because it's a delicate balance.
And the obverse is true. Warner owned the Cosmos soccer team, and when the network deal was made, the only team they wanted on ABC was the Cosmos. So I had to fight to hold on to our local games for our local audience and on our local revenue, such as little as it was. But you saw what happened to the Cosmos. It was another example of soccer is coming to America, soccer is coming to America, and it's finally, is it here?
It'll always have great potential.
Oh, can I copy that line without giving you credit?
No, actually, that's what Mark Cuban said to me at a league meeting. He said, David, China has great potential. And you know what, David? It's always going to have great potential. And I said something that's unprintable, and we went about our business of developing China.
And you've developed China in a sidelight by encouraging Chinese players. I think you're doing more to get a
Yes.
peace in North Korea than some of the politicians are.
Well, Ambassador Rodman was the highest-ranking American to personally see Kim Jong-un. Don't knock it.
Is the importation of Chinese players strictly on ability, or is it part of a marketing plan?
No, it's strictly on ability, because the game is great over there. Kobe is still selling jerseys there. Allen Iverson is probably still selling jerseys there. We know that Steph Marbury is, but no, the Chinese are great fans. I think Dr. Naismith, after he invented the game in Springfield, took a group of missionaries to China, so there's a significant number of Chinese who think they invented the game there, and they may have, because the Chinese are great basketball fans.
We didn't have to win an award to put baseball into Japan.
Or something. Yeah.
Something like that.
So anyway, I'm laughing because you mentioned the AFL contract. Didn't ABC do the USFL, Mr. Trump's league?
Not in my day, at least.
Oh, okay, probably afterwards. Okay, I made the first cable deal for the NBA in 1979. We'll call it. It was $400,000. There were 4 million homes, and at that time, cable homes, ESPN had 4 million, and USA Network, or its predecessor, which was a company called MSG UA Columbia, had 4 million homes. And I was such a smart marketer that I decided to go with USA Network rather than this thing called Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. Because I remember thinking, who's going to watch sports 24 hours a day? That's ridiculous. But it wasn't so ridiculous, and there's been enormous growth. And we ultimately hooked up with ESPN.
Spend a minute on ESPN. If you follow Wall Street, everybody is a little nervous these days about the bottom line financial success of Walt Disney Company. Without doubt, Disney owns the movie business with their tent poles and their animated companies, and they own the global movie business. And without doubt, they, along with Comcast, do pretty well, all other things considered, in amusement parks. But they are heavily committed to sports. They own ESPN, 80% of it. Hearst owns the other 20%. You know why Hearst owns the other 20% of ESPN? Because when it was being sold out, and Leonard Goldenson met with
Was it Frank Bennick or no?
with Frank Bennick. Leonard didn't want to put up the last bit of investment, and Frank said, "I'll put up the $1 million and take 20%."
It's the best investment they ever made.
Pardon?
It's the best investment they ever made.
It's sustaining the company. So
What you read about in the newspapers, though, Wall Street Journal and others, take it lightly because what they're focusing on is the fall off, the reduction in subscribers, or the slowing down in growth. But the ESPN franchise is a huge franchise. I don't have the numbers, but what they gross in terms of subscriber fees, figured out they're getting $7 a month for their various networks, times 12, $84, times, you know, it's the horror. They've gone from 100 million to 85 million. But 85 million times 84 is a bigger number than I can compute. But it's a real moneymaker for them. It's just Wall Street rewards you for growth, and they're not in a growth industry.
let me put a footnote on that.
Okay.
In the decline in the cord cutting, you all know about cord cutting, in the decline of cable and satellite subscriptions from over 100 million to something over 80 million, you say $7. My calculation on ESPN is it can be 8 and change if you're carrying the Spanish and the classic channel and so forth. Of the typical subscriber's cable bill in a big city, about $80 a month goes to programming for the programming package, plus HBO, plus Showtime, plus multiple sets, plus the modem, plus equipment charges. So you can spend $300 a month for cable in a big house or a big apartment, but about $80 is programming. Of that $80, $30 to $40 goes directly or indirectly to sports.
That's good.
That's good for him,
No.
bad for Charter and Cablevision and Time Warner Cable, who are losing subscribers because people are saying, I don't need all those channels and I'm spending too much money.
Well,
And the theme of what I've been trying to do here, and I surely don't know the answer, is where does the cord cutting end when we're left with it and we haven't yet become a fully digital business? What does the environment look like?
well, I would only say, based upon my own experience, we have followed and been drawn by the growth of the industry. We started out being on over-the-air network, ABC at one point. We then moved to cable. We then moved to satellite. We then moved to the internet, NBA TV, and along with it, NBA.com. We've been streaming for years through League Pass and League Pass International. So if you're not getting enough games on ESPN, TNT, your regional sports channel, you can buy another 1,000 games for only a mere $199.
Domestic games.
Domestic games, but actually the games, League Pass and League Pass International, we have a direct-to-consumer package, literally on a global basis, which is a way to experiment.
Is it a you pick 'em
Not yet, but it will
out of
be.
market package?
No, it won't be you pick 'em. You take 'em. You take 100 and you take 1,200. You take 1,000 games, but there's more diversity now, and then came social media, and so the NBA and our players are prominent on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Snap. If you want a photo of me in a hot dog bun later, we can meet over here because that's compelling, video. But it's great, and so I see it on a sort of, it's a pendulum that swings. I mean, it was at nothing. In 1981, our games were on tape delay in our finals, if you can believe that. And then all of a sudden, we and other sports followed the growth of media in this extraordinary way. And now something else has happened, which is over the top, where people are going to want to, and it's inevitable, by the way, because when you add up your bill, the average, let's take a shortcut here. How many people here have neither cable nor satellite in their dwelling? Okay, the fact that there's anyone, that was unthinkable. It's okay, you can confess. It's nice, I saw your hand go up slowly. But it's really, that's, and some years ago I used to fight with one of my sons, how can you not have a landline? That's ridiculous. Get a goddamn phone. Of course, nobody has a landline anymore, except for us old guys. But it's interesting. So I see it as we're in a transition now, but there's more life left in the sports. I don't see the danger signs that Ed is referring to. I see it for the networks, but I don't see it for sports, because there's a group of players that have been, a group of media players that have been on the sidelines and that will start to exert themselves or assert themselves. And I'm talking about Amazon, Apple.
Facebook has made a deal for cricket, global cricket. Now, cricket can't get on the air anywhere, but let me tell you, there's a market for cricket in a lot of places.
Including in the United States for those displaced fans of cricket that want to watch it, because ESPN did the World Cup of cricket here and got 60,000 viewers to pay $100 for the subscription. So you begin to see the future of what's going to happen, and it's going to happen in the Olympics, where those who want to watch curling or equestrian or whatever will be able to know exactly what they get, and they'll pay a certain fee for that, and they won't have to watch what's going on. So I see I'm interested to see how the pendulum is, when it's going to stop and start swinging back. But I think it's still, sports and television is still a growth industry.
Let me illustrate it with the NFL. The two networks that had Sunday afternoon way back originally had their pick of games. Then the Monday night package came, and there was a smaller pick of games. Now there's a Thursday night package. They're not playing more games. They're just making the menu a little leaner for the Sunday afternoon guys. And in the course of the Sunday afternoon, they're promoting the NFL's own network, which has the balance of the Thursday night games. So they're not only paying a fee and having diluted product to put it on the air, which is affecting the ratings. Ratings are down this year. But it's just that some of the bigger cities are not doing as well, Philadelphia excluded. But the less product and more exposure. And the NFL has the leverage to do that. And what David is saying in his very gentle way is where and when he had the leverage, he did it too.
I did? No, we used to call it slicing the salami.
A little thinner.
A little thinner. You would have your network package, and then you have your cable package, then you have your satellite package, then you have your NBA TV package, but also the ability to have a package that goes internationally is a really important testing ground for me to do almost anything. So that's great too. And so,
how is that revenue shared? Equally among teams?
Equally among the teams. And that was something that we were able to, as that built up, that kept the issue of revenue sharing from the robust conversation that it has now become part of amongst the teams. Because the smaller grossing teams, not the smaller market teams, but the smaller grossing teams come in and say they need help. And historically, I have been supportive of the notion, because we would say to teams in large markets, like the Knicks and the Lakers, that you need other teams to come in to play against. You can't just play the whole season like the Cosmos did in Ed's time against second-rate teams. Eventually, your league will not
survive.
Will not survive. But the plus side of the social media has been that it has exploded the sort of myth that a player has to play in a large market to get the exposure that he wants. Because
speaking of Syracuse, what did Anthony just do?
Right. Well, he just played his way out of New York.
To a small market.
To a small market. But more importantly, you say Russell Westbrook or RWB, everyone knows, and last year, until he went to Golden State, you say KD, Kevin Durant, or it's like, are you from Golden State? Are you from...
No, it's big Oklahoma City Thunder fan at this point.
I see.
Anymore.
Not so
KD
much anymore since
frustrated.
KD left. Okay. You know, it's so much fun because they all have their social followings. You know, even some guy that plays in Cleveland has twice as many social media followers as the president. Can you imagine that? Except the president is more active.
Who does your let me get to the thrust of my question.
Go ahead.
MLBAM.
Right.
That's designed to sell games a la carte, out of market, in other media, in other venues and so forth. And they've developed the infrastructure to do it.
It's too long a discussion because there's a company by the name of Delta Tray that does also out of market, and there are other infrastructures being built up to deliver games as well. In other words, when HBO decided it needed to stream with HBO Go, they actually used BAM, Major League Baseball Advanced Media, but I think they're moving back to in-house because they're able to develop their own streaming apparatus. So I think the future is going to be interesting. And from my perspective, BAM was a streaming service that provided, hired hundreds and hundreds of people to provide streaming service to other properties, soccer leagues, operas, you name it, they did it. But I'm not sure what they have the rights on a contract basis to Major League Baseball, but it's not perpetual, and they have a contract with the NHL, which will someday come to an end as well. So I'm the question of what you have when you just have a streaming service without the games themselves is kind of interesting. But what do I know?
What does he know? Is hockey going to catch on in America?
Hockey has caught on in America. It's all, first of all, they have a network contract on NBC. They have a super duper, even larger contract in Canada. They have their center ice hockey package, which is the equivalent of the NBA's League Pass. They have a contract with BAM, which gives them, a share of BAM. They have, I think, a 10% ownership in BAM. So they've done a pretty good job. And historically, their attendance in the old days was always better head-to-head than basketball. Hockey, I think they started later. You could drink more. That's what I say to my buddy Gary Bettman. They get boozed up. But no, not really. But they're a very popular sport. They don't have, the ratings that the NBA has, as we don't have the ratings that the NFL has. I'd like to be so unsuccessful as the NFL with their ratings decline, because, soaking wet, I think the ratings of a regular season game on TNT are probably at the high end. Kozner, where are you? What's the rating on ESPN for a regular season game? You're lying. That can't be that bad. I shouldn't have asked you. No, okay. It's in the ones. And it's true. And a bad year for football is they're getting a 7 rating on a network. eat your heart out, other leagues. They're doing pretty darn well.
Let's make the analogy to soccer. Television has an infinite supply of soccer matches from Mexico, from the Premier League, from every place in the world, where the quality of play is probably superior to the quality of the play of the American Soccer League. Is soccer suffering from a surfeit, or is it just that it's going to take a while longer to develop?
I've lived their problem, because when our games are brought into Europe, there are many, many fans who would rather watch the NBA stars than the stars of the EuroLeague. So it's almost a reverse image there. But I think it's just a question of time. It may be a long time, but they are consistent. They've built these soccer-specific stadia. And they're getting some tremendous attendance numbers. The Atlanta, whatever they're called, I forget what they're called. The MLS team is drawing 70,000 people to the new Mercedes-Benz Dome in Portland and in
Seattle.
Vancouver and Seattle up the West Coast. They get these incredible audiences. So, and they're attracting a lot of interest in terms of franchises. There's a franchise that's going to be bought on the old, Southern Cal. They knocked down the arena there, and there's going to be another Major League Soccer team there. And they're fighting now about expansion teams in Sacramento and Cincinnati, and there was a recent one in Orlando. So there seems to be a continuation of the notion for each city, in some cases based upon their size, that it's a good thing to have a professional sports team. And if it can't be one of the four majors, the MLS is a good thing. So Cincinnati is going to have a bond issue, and it does foster a sense of community, and it gets people involved, and they feel good about it. And the good news is that it started to have some effect on women's soccer as well. So sports is the way to engage a community in a single conversation, and it uplifts the spirits of the entire town. Or so I testified in so many municipal hearings in support of bond issues. But
yeah, well, it's the same as the argument of people who don't like sports saying, why am I paying $30 to $40 a month on my cable bill for something I never watch? It's the non-sports fan saying, why is my government, whether it's the city or the state or whatever, having me subsidize through bonds or whatever the arena?
I don't have an argument. But the interesting thing I will say, having grown up in this business, is that long back in the dark ages, sort of in a galaxy far away, what drove the birth of cable was sports. There was something called distant signal importation, and people, communities. It started out because picture a mountaintop outside of Pittsburgh, or outside of Wheeling, West Virginia. You put up a tower, and all of a sudden your antenna picks up signals from Pittsburgh, and then you run cables to the homes. That was the beginning of cable, community antenna television. Then some whippersnapper by the name of Ted Turner figured out a way to overcome it with satellite distribution, and there we were going. But that's how, and then in order to get people to adopt cable, there was a scramble to sign up the local teams. So if you wanted to have cable distributed in New York, you got the Knicks and the Rangers, etc. And so it was a boon for all. It gave cable operators what we refer to as lift. If you signed the local sports teams, you got more subscription revenue because they had to have you, and of course they never wanted to share it with the sports teams. There was always a negotiation that went on about the lift that came from from that. And so there's this big spectrum of what has happened, and now we're in an interesting place. But there'll be something else.
Let me illustrate that. We talked earlier with some of the students about Syracuse per se and Newhouse per se. Newhouse owned television, newspapers in Syracuse, owned television stations in Syracuse, and owned the cable system in Syracuse. Well, they discovered that they could bring up the Knicks and bring in Madison Square Garden, so they went into the business of building microwave towers to get the signal from the Empire State Building into the Syracuse cable system so that the people could watch MSG. Then they brought in the Yankees games, and
they weren't allowed. I used to be a lawyer that represented the NBA. Even though they did it, they weren't allowed to do it. They weren't supposed to do it because distant signal importation was based upon just local networks that were over the air were allowed to be imported. So
which were presumed to be free to begin with.
Right. WPIX, WOR had the Yankees and the Mets respectively. Madison Square Garden was just making direct deals with the cable operators. And, it was kind of interesting. So I had to live that. It still causes me to break out in a rash as I would go lobbying against Superstation, and Ted Turner would come out of the senator's office and say, "Don't you work for me?" Because he didn't want the senators to do anything about superstations. And I'll just give you a little insight to how I knew that we were heading to where the House and the Senate are now. I went and see one senator. No, he was a representative. He's now a senator, and explained to him why this single importation was not fair to the leagues, because there were people paying for it in Atlanta, but then Ted Turner was sending it all over the country. And this representative said to me, "Yeah, but I can't do anything for you because my father is a big fan of the Hawks."
Of the Hawks.
So, okay, got it.
I was
good.
your counterpart in the movie industry.
Yes.
We called Ted Turner a pirate. He bought a television station in Atlanta. It was the only independent station in Atlanta. He bought up the MGM movie library for Atlanta.
Yes.
He bought up Looney Tunes for Atlanta. He bought the local baseball team for Atlanta. And he put it on the satellite and put it all over the country.
I get a headache thinking about it. He was a genius.
He was a genius, and he convinced the Congress that it was a service. The cable was necessary, and that he was the spearhead of cable.
Right.
And the best we could get was that the cable systems paid a small percentage of their revenue into a copyright pool in which Jack Valenti took your pants off, because we got most of the money.
Well, that's not how I remember it exactly. But that's it. But it was like throwing a large bone amongst a group of dogs, sports included. And so we go and they had every year. There's a very large pool, and it still exists. And the Motion Picture Association of America, which is headed by the aforementioned Jack Valenti, who was an orator of the highest quality, they came down and said, "Well, we want all of the money," because when you take the ratings that the movies get and the length of time that a movie runs, just give it to us. And we said, "Well, not so fast. The reason our ratings aren't insignificant, and the reason people pay cable operators is that they want sports." And then baseball said to us, "Yes, but we have 80 games that go for, I guess, 10 hours each, or something like it.
It feels like it
It
sometimes.
feels like it. And you only have 40 games that are much shorter, and our ratings are higher. So if you do the math, we should get like 5 times whatever you get." And we said, "Not so fast. You are summer. We are winter. with hockey, and we were standing toe-to-toe with hockey, shoulder to shoulder. And so we made a pretty good deal. Jack thought he took our pants down. We were giggling that we really made out like bandits. And it was a substantial amount of money every year. But those are the cable wars before cable was ubiquitous. But now it's not going to be ubiquitous anymore. It's going to be, it's shrinking, which is fascinating, to be replaced by an over-the-top series of services. Because while we weren't watching, Sling, Hulu, PlayStation, DirecTV Now, YouTube TV are all over, and a streaming sports service by the name of Fubo TV, all are over-the-top services. And
You forgot the major one, Netflix.
well, I was only talking about sports, but
Oh,
that's
okay.
right. And it's not insignificant that every one of the ones I just mentioned have ESPN and sports. Netflix says, oh, no, it doesn't want sports. But guess what? They're going to come around, as have, as soon as Amazon and Facebook stood back, and Apple stood back, and then the leagues extended their contracts for another decade of the incumbents. Now I think Facebook has, Twitter has a game of the week, a baseball game of the week. There's all kinds of shows that are being done and games that are being carried on those, on the social media sites. So you can see where that's going to go as the rights become available. I guess Amazon just bought, make this up, tennis rights in a European country. So it's going to be on, and Amazon just paid $50 million for the NFL Thursday night games. So those guys,
Put a
lot of
pin
money.
in that for a second. And Amazon is not necessarily in business to resell the sports or resell the movies it's producing. It's in business to get you to sign up for their delivery service, which gets you on their customer rolls.
Amazon Prime, yeah.
Amazon Prime.
Well,
This is going on in the motion picture business. Should an Amazon-produced movie or a Netflix-produced movie that doesn't appear in theaters be considered for an Academy Award when its objective is not the same as the movie company objectives?
what is a movie company objective?
And what is a movie
To
company?
make great art? No. To sell as many seats as they possibly can.
And
Stop
if you're
wrapping
Dis-
yourself in the blanket of these wonderful public servants, the movie makers.
You can tell that there are two guys up here who weren't satisfied with the status quo,
No, that's right.
who didn't like to look in a rearview mirror.
No, that's right. And change is good, especially if you're alert and pushing and crazy. Change is good because those that worry about execution and detail and getting everything right are going to do better than the people who get just satisfied. And so it's a very, very interesting time. And Disney is actually, in the motion picture industry, has done that in a certain way. They didn't sit still. They saw it was coming. And they bought Pixar, and they bought Marvel, and they bought Lucas, right? So you could watch Thor Ragnarok or something. What's the name of it? That's it.
Which is a huge hit.
Huge hit.
And in today's paper, they're talking about buying 20th Century Fox. Least of one of the reasons is they would recapture ownership of some of their Marvel characters,
Right.
who have done wonderfully for 20th Century. You talk about execution. My favorite story about baskets on television. It's a sport made for television. The full court is in the picture, the close-up is in the picture, the rerun is in the picture, as opposed to soccer, where you see all those little midgets running around and you don't know what's happening, as opposed to soccer where there's no natural break for the commercials, as opposed to baseball. Think about it. If you're not a baseball fan, it is the dullest physical presentation of anything.
I'm from New York City. I grew up To me, the baseball games, particularly on the radio, was like wallpaper. It was always on. I was listening to my beloved New York Giants before they were whisked away to San Francisco, and then you watched it on TV. It was always on in the background. But it was a different, now all the sports are worried. The real prime threat is that kids aren't watching it and they're not even playing it. And so there's a real problem at hand where sports leagues and shoe companies, athletic and apparel companies, are trying to get kids off their duffs to get out and play a little bit. Because if you play, you tend to watch. So
Which is why everybody's so hopeful about soccer.
Yeah. It's very popular at the high school level.
And talk about kids playing. I realize there are personal and medical and social reasons to be concerned. I'm not minimizing that. But how important is the concussion issue to the future of football?
It's potentially existential, because if they don't find a way to deal with it, to reduce it, then parents are not going to let their kids play. And it's going to change the makeup of the people that play the game as well. There will always be people to play. There are fighters that fight, that walk into the ring willingly to get their brains beat out. And the same is true of UFC. So there will always be the game, but it will cater to a whole different group of people, I think, in the future.
Is that a threat to soccer? Is heading the ball the same physical threat?
Yeah, people don't understand it, but yes, lots of youngsters get concussions from heading the ball. Not as many as they probably get in UFC when the idea is to kill somebody, which that's not a sport that I have a lot of patience with, nor do I have a lot of patience with, as a personal matter, with boxing. I think what happened to Muhammad Ali was so sad and sorrowful. I mean, they talked about Parkinson's syndrome, but the champ, who I knew, he was battered. He gave his body to the sport. And yet the sport thrives. You got a big fight, go to Las Vegas, every important star you know is there at courtside. So that says something as much about us as it does about the various sports where people are willing to get their brains beaten for some money.
Are you pleased with the progress of women's basketball?
Yes, very much so. It wasn't easy. I started it for strictly business reasons. I thought it was a good thing for our arenas, our regional sports networks, the ability to develop fans. I didn't become a partisan until the male media said, well, it just can't work, David. And that's all you had to say to me. So now the WNBA just celebrated its 20th season, I guess 21st. And it has a nice television contract with ESPN. And it had its best season in attendance in a long time. And it's really it's a fun game to watch.
And the Title IX has helped the colleges make a sport out of it, too.
Yes. Well, ESPN put a big investment into the NCAA, men and women, so we had a relationship with ESPN for the WNBA, so they came out of the women's tournament into the WNBA. It has challenges, it's a summertime sport, etc. But it's interesting. It's very insightful, because I used to just get in fights for kicks with the Associated Press sports editors when I said to them, so how do you decide how much space to give to the WNBA? And they would say, well, it's a little bit art and a little bit science. I said, yeah, that's the way you guys keep people out of your clubs, a little bit of art, okay? And so those are fighting words for the liberals who were in charge of the sports section. But it's interesting. I think women's sports don't get a fair shake in the coverage that they get. They do on the West Coast more, but not here. The New York Times gets the results for the WNBA in the agate print, and then they do a feature about a monument that is standing in front of the Tottenham Spurs soccer stadium in London or something like
Does
that.
the New York Times have a sports page?
Online.
Online.
It's
Exactly.
an online sports page.
While you're talking about political reactions, talk about taking a knee.
Talk about taking a knee. Well, I would say, as I said today at another conference, this is a long day, that
Are we on reruns? I think sports were on.
that our players are trained in social media. They speak to the media after practice, after their shoot-arounds. They speak to the media before the game. They speak to the media after the game. And then the 2 or 3 stars of the game speak to the media one more time. And they've all been signed up as soon as they're rookies on Twitter, Facebook, you name it. We did it with them back in the day. And so they really do have a very different platform than sort of relatively faceless NFL players who are trying desperately to get heard. And they decided that their way to get heard was to take a knee. And so, you know, that's what it is. There you go. And it worked perfectly for the president because everybody is focusing on the knee, not on the fact that the EPA is allowing mountaintop removal, talk about a little political pitch here,
Yeah, I
to
gotta hit
dump into the streams that our children are drinking water from, or that the interior is planning to develop the national parks. And how do you develop them? By putting mining, coal mining, oil drilling, and commercial development. I mean, but what's everyone talking about? Oh, Kaepernick took a knee. It plays exactly, it's the most effective sort of diversion that the president has come up with yet, and it plays precisely to the people that support him.
The knee is a dog whistle.
Exactly right.
If you were still in office, what would you have done with Popovich?
Popovich? You mean exercising his First Amendment rights?
Isn't that what the players are doing?
Well, not exactly. It's an interesting subject for
And should
another
the
day.
decision be made by a pizza company?
No, the decision should be made not by a pizza company. The decision should be made in accordance whatever rights the collective bargaining agreement gives to the commissioner or whatever restrictions it places on the players. And that's easy enough. But when you've got the commander-in-chief pounding away on it, it's hard. I don't envy Roger Goodell in the NFL because there's a big wind coming on a daily basis because it enables you to not talk about the health care legislation, the tax legislation, or all kinds of legislation that hasn't passed.
Speaking about big win, how many owners did you have?
I don't even remember. 18.
18.
Now there are 30. But I had 30 on the way out, but we used to be 18.
All retiring, quiet, submissive, compliant.
That's right.
complacent.
It ticked me off. I heard Mark Cuban give an interview. And by the way, I was on at this conference I was at today, the Times Dealbook Conference. Mark was a speaker.
Is he running for president?
Yes. When you listen to him talk, you could hear that. And Andrew Rosalka knew I was in the audience. He said, "What do you think, David?" I said, "Well, first of all, I'm going to vote for Mark because I helped raise him." And Mark agreed. Yes, you did. Yes, he did. And then in his own defense, he said, "Yeah, but I helped you set up your Twitter account." That was true, too. I don't know. When Mark said, "Oh, they weren't used to entrepreneurial types," I heard it on like Fox Radio. I said, "Shut up, Mark, will you?" Entrepreneurial types. There was no greater entrepreneur than Ted Turner. He was cable before cable was cool, as we used to say.
That was his
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so we've had plenty of, the Dolan family, Rand Ariskog from ITT Sheridan. I don't want to insult anyone by leaving them out, but we've had a lot of grand entrepreneurs in the NBA over the years. Although the nature has changed, there are more people relating to technology than there Used to be real estate and in cars, car dealerships and the like, but now it's a much broader way.
Well, Paul Allen is the whole business of sports encapsulated.
Yeah, well, and Steve Ballmer.
Right.
Okay.
Can I ventilate a pet peeve?
Only if you leave enough time for the people to ask questions.
Yeah, no, we'll go to questions. The reference to teams by their nicknames rather than their city names. I don't know where the Ducks or the Grizzlies or all of those are located. I'm much more comfortable hearing New York, Detroit.
You know, I don't know. Don't be such a grouch. You know, what upsets me is when I was a starter and I was a lad, you could watch. That's a graduate of the Newhouse School doing Facebook Live. You could walk into a room, look at the TV set,